You wake up, you just drive around, you have a
Yes,
drink. Everything is like, nice and simple and cool. You go to the beach, and
yes,
this sort of identity or like construct, but it's not necessarily true, but it's
yes,
something that we sell to people in
yes.
order to bring them here, in order for them to
Nice.
partake in our economy and whatnot like that. I think that was how I was
Right.
able to connect the two.
So socially constructed identity helps with branding, where the commodification of the art is concerned. So it drives branding. So the socially constructed cultural identity drives branding. Can somebody type that there for me, please? Patreon. All you're going good so far. I don't know why all you wasn't in class at first. You thought the thing would have been boring, and
Oh,
Patreon, go ahead.
no, miss, I just came from I had to check somebody at the hospital and I just got in.
Okay, right, you made it. Well, your colleagues now start to talk, so you're reaching good time.
um, I am thinking of it's improving, it can improve the standard of living for a community, like encouraging economic development of a community. For instance, Kwasi mentioned mentioned the goat races, but
Mhm.
like for instance, what could I use? Okay, the Americans, right, in Moruga, um, they actually, what they did now
Yeah,
is they created American market. There's
yeah,
also the American Museum. There's
yeah,
also there's I think a natural habitat where you could actually come and
yes,
see artifacts, but you
yes,
could purchase herbs and you could purchase stuff that was only made in that community.
yes,
And by doing that every year, it actually creates a development within the community. So
yeah,
they just expand and expand and expand and
yes,
create demand as well.
yes. So it engenders community development.
Hmm.
Yes, yes, community pride. So I have a trick question based on Patreon's example. Is that socially constructed or is that experience based? That is just, is that socially constructed or is that a case of that is just what we do within that community? That's
Is it
here.
is it possible to be both?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's that's right. And we see this a lot in the context of heritage. It's like what we do in the old yard. It's the performance of heritage as we know it, but it's also heritage making, you see. And so on the one hand, it's based or it's seeped in experience derived cultural identity. This is what Trinidad and Tobago traditional mass is. And at the same time, there is a social construction going on there because, of course, I am deliberately trying to weave into young persons' minds that this is cool to do and this is important to know and this is fun and this is great and so on and so forth. So yes, it is possible to be both. And we see it a lot in the context of heritage. If we are clear in our minds as to the ways in which heritage can be sustainable. Jamie, I hope you're taking notes for your colleague, right?
Definitely.
You know, I forgot to start recording from the start, but anyway, we have some of it. You could even share the recording. Yes, Tonya. You have a question or comment on your hand just remained up.
Oh gosh,
Right.
I think it remained up. Sorry.
Right. Okay, no problem. So does everybody understand then what we were trying to do here? Because the point is this, class. It's not a pie out of the sky thing. And certainly with a course called Arts, Culture, and Society, while it's important that we understand where Throsby is coming from in terms of the cultural value characteristics, it's important that we recognize and be cognizant of the fact that he's an economist and he is helping us to understand that idea of commodification from a socioeconomic standpoint. But it is still important that we understand what may be the sociocultural driver here. And I am putting it to you, class, that it's cultural identity. And in that regard, we have recognized that cultural identity can come up at us in one of two ways. Either, as Kevin would have pointed out, socialization, and of course we know the term to be socially constructed, or in terms of what Roxanne said, of experience, and that is, as they like to say, well, this is just what we do, meaning it's organic, it is of us, you see. And so it's also important that in understanding that connection, as we were just discussing there, we understand what is derived from those interconnections there. And we got about 3 or 4 pretty good examples. We recognize that it drives branding. We recognize that it's also that it drives demand. We also recognize that it engenders community pride and community development. Can anyone think of any of the others that it may do? What about how does that lead to new markets? Does it? Is it possible that cultural identity, whether socially constructed or based on experience, lead to new markets, new market spaces? Let's hear. And if so, can you give an example of how that may be done?
Soka going to Japan, that's a brand new audience for us.
Brand new audience. And is it that we are packaging the soca in a particular way? Or is it that we are just giving them it just how we do it?
We're giving them it just how, from what I've seen, is as we do it.
Yes. And it's the same thing with dancehall culture. It's the same thing with dancehall culture, which, as we know, has become a global brand. You see, it's the same thing with Rastafarianism. And what we will realize is, class, what I'm trying to get at, so that's our next one, creates new market spaces, new market context. And out of that, it generates then derivative products, which may be the ones that are hinged on socially constructed identity. So, for example, reggae, tied to Rastafarianism, or when we look at it, the social construction within there now is the faux lock, not so? People don't sit down now and wait to grow a whole head of hair locks. They ain't doing like Dr. T. They're going by the salon and somebody sitting down there and making some locks and putting in their head. True or false? Not so? And so these are examples of social construction in terms of identity, and of course being tied to products and services that have now become more commodified, that would have come out of cultural practice, one can say. Okay, so everybody understands the point that we're making there. Is that clear to all?
Yes, Miss.
Yes, Miss.
Great, great. Right. So it's important, though, whilst we ourselves understand the distinction, it's important, though, because we're in postgrad, that we understand that people do hold these perspectives. On the one hand, whether cultural identity is given, meaning socially constructed, or whether it's created, and of course, is cultural value socially constructed, or is that something else? And so we want to look or take a listen to Marcus Leon's perspective on this first before we go to another one. I do want us to pay close attention because we want to discuss the two. So the first point that I want you to make note as you are listening is to identify what is his perspective, where does his view lie? That is one. And to identify something that he said that basically supports, that shows that that is his view. Everybody understands what I'm asking? Great. So let us look and take a listen to Marcus's perspective. I'm going to come out of one screen and share another with you.
I have a challenge for us today. A challenge for a world where 250 million people are searching for a new home through mass migration. A challenge for a time when 1.8 billion images are posted to social media on a daily basis. A challenge for a society where we need to educate our young for a very uncertain future.
Are you still seeing the
I have a
screen, class?
challenge about identity. What drives our
Yeah.
identity?
I can hear. Yeah.
Were they created? So today, together, I would like to explore the idea of identity as a creative process. Who are we and what can we become? So who am I? I'm a photographic artist. I was born here in Exeter. I self-identify as 100% British, and I was named after a famous Roman philosopher emperor. But wait a minute. Today is the first day I've been in Exeter since I was born here 50 years ago. My DNA, my ancestral DNA, tells me actually I'm much more French and Scandinavian than British. And the truth of the matter is, I was named after my great uncle Richard's fabulously foul-mouthed African grey parrot, Marcus Aurelius, who he saved from the southern Sudan in the late 1930s. Now, if you really want to know what drives me, where my energy is from, you only need to know one thing, and that's the loss of my brother Andrew when I was 6. Now, that loss and the subsequent journey of self-realization that continues today has given me an amazing energy for life, a passion for the here and now, and a sense of responsibility for living a life that Andrew didn't get. But isn't that a choice, an act? Have I not just made that up? It's a piece of creation. Now that creation has been supported throughout my life by photography and the camera. Now, I was given my first camera when I was 10 years old, and I've rarely been without one since. Now, the camera has many uses, but it's its ability to hold time, to stop for a fragile second, the journey towards death that seems most powerful here. In many ways, it's been transformational in my life, helping me take a life out of balance and find a voice, my voice. It's also been the red carpet to everywhere and anyone I wanted to know or meet. For 40 years, I've made images from the ghetto to the palace, from the fashion shoot to the social issue reportage, giving voice to the known and the unknown. In many ways, it's been a key to the most transformational relationships in my life. It's given me access to some of the most intimate inner places, other realities, and other lives. Dare I tell you, I actually photographed my wife before we ever spoke or even knew each other's names. So the camera has helped me explore ideas of identity, my own and others. And today, I would like to give you an insight into my most recent project, Somos Brazil, We Are Brazil. It's an exploration of modern Brazilian identity through the lens of a series of DNA and sound-enabled portraits. So for 30 years, I've travelled across the Americas, and I've remained amazed at how differently those from the North and the South self-identify. While many from the US seem resolutely attached to the idea of motherland, Brazilians seem undaunted by simply being Brazilian. So when I met, fell in love with, married a Brazilian, and we made 2 very beautiful Brazilian children, and they turned to me and say, "Daddy, Nós somos brasileiros. We are Brazilians. I knew I had a deeper search on my hands to understand the identity of my family. So my team and I traveled 22,000 kilometers across Brazil, taking the photographs, the soundscapes, and the DNA samples of a cohort of remarkable Brazilians, all who had been nominated as agents of change within their communities. In many ways, the best of Brazil. Now, we've taken the sound and we've turned that into a sound app. It's an image-activated app. You swipe your device over their faces and they tell you their stories. They talk about their communities, their childhood memories, and their dreams and aspirations for the future. Now, in many ways, this is actually a disruptive act. The reality is, as an audience, we mostly make our own judgments about images. We make our own choices. But here, we've managed to give a voice to the voiceless. The DNA, in many ways, is also a different lens in which we can look at identity. Most interestingly for me, it's less the science and the fact of the matter that matters here. It's actually how we weave this new fabulous science and the information it gives us into our own personal histories. My wife, blonde, blue-eyed, Brazilian. And yet when she took her DNA test, she found out that she carried both African, Sephardic Jewish, and Latin American tribal blood. She was able to see her life and her community and her role within her family in a completely different way. So this project that brings art and science together, I think puts a mirror up to a society that has a very all-encompassing culture, but it also allows us to define a space where we can explore identity. So today, I would like to share with you 4 of the stories that I had the great honour to bear witness to. So Ana Claudia, she told us of her childhood memories, some idyllic, playing in the fields of Sao Paulo with her sisters and her cousins, but some horrific, witnessing the pain and the suffering of her grandmother, Maria Paula, who had a terrible arterial condition, which meant she had to have a double leg amputation. Now, young Anna's life was permeated with that pain, and in response, she cut the legs off her dolls and turned her bedroom into an infirmary. She vowed that no one would suffer like her grandmother would. She trained to be a doctor. She qualified the day her grandmother died. But she is now renowned across Brazil for being an exceptional palliative care doctor, preaching a gospel of love for people at the end of their lives. Now, Bequinca, we met in the botanical gardens of Belém. The son of a tribal leader, he reminisced to us about the Kaipo tribe, a warrior tribe, and his grandfather who died protecting his lands and traditions from the invading colonists. Now, when Cabral travelled to Brazil from Portugal in 1500, he found a wondrous land of 3 to 5 million tribal peoples across its vast forests and seaboard. Today, from colonisation, slavery, environmental destruction and disease, we're looking at a number more like 300,000. So Bequinca has reinvented his role in his society as a warrior counsellor. He talks to his people about modern Brazil and gives them the opportunity to protect their culture, their traditions, and their land. Layla took our breath away. Elegant and energetic, she was born the daughter of a migrant worker from the northeast. Alongside her dormant father, living a block from Ipanema Beach in Rio de Janeiro, she witnessed the poverty and wealth of Brazil at first hand. Determined to make a difference, she set up a company, Beleza Natural, a cosmetics firm that today employs 2,300 people, 90% of whom are single mothers from the favelas. She is testament to vision and hard work and talks to her young staff and tells them not even the sky is the limit. Now, I was delighted to meet Eliane. She was telling us and marveling at the fact that her father at 85 still made an annual pilgrimage to the grave of his first teacher, Louisa, the daughter of a slave and a merchant. Now, Louisa had taught him and cured him of his blindness to words, thus allowing him to nurture his illiterate family to give Eliane the chance to be a significant wordsmith and today an award-winning journalist. Now, I was amazed by how Eliane self-identified. She saw her whole life as boundless. She saw herself as the sum of all the stories she'd ever heard. And in the vastness of the universe, she saw all life as a singularity, but her own as a multitude. So as an artist, in my studio, we often talk about reinvention, the need, dare I say, the necessity to see multiple possibilities of our futures, to embrace change, to see the opportunity in the unknown. So I hope through the lens of these Brazilian lives, you can see that identity can be a journey. We can write fictions of our lives. So the next time you sit and ponder on the who am I question, consider that we truly grow our identities when we are guiding lights to not only ourselves, but to others. Thank you.
Right, class. So tell me, thoughts, please. What are your thoughts on that? Comments?
Is this in relation to like commodification or just in general about the video?
Well, the question I had asked was, if you could, let me just put back up this slide for you. If you could discern what is his perspective in terms of what we were just speaking about, whether cultural identity is given or created, whether cultural value is socially constructed, and most certainly, is it possible, how does he see those to operate in terms of the commodification of culture? So what are your thoughts? And this is based on his perspective, what he would have said there, based on the examples that he gave. Where is this class today? What's going on? Oh, you want a timeout today?
Hi, Miss. So I wasn't really hearing these slides, so I guess I'll have to watch it. So I'm in the video, so I'll look at it again after class. But I have a question.
Yes.
On your slide there, you have cultural identity given or created. But in order for it to be given, doesn't it have to be created first?
Right. Given meaning socially constructed, as opposed to you creating it on your own.
Okay, understood.
Right. So everybody is tired today, but there's not the middle of the semester yet, and I didn't do no assignment yet. So what's going on happen? Are they gonna burn out on me?
I think based upon what I heard, I think he believes that it's a bit of both, that cultural identity is both socially constructed and also can be created.
Yes. Yes. And what examples did he give to reinforce that point?
The example of Bikwinka, as well as Leila and Eliane, how they have utilized their own culture, their own history, their own the socially constructed cultural identity, and then from there infuse their own experiences with it, and then sort of monetized it.
Yes. Yes. You see, I'm very intrigued by this juxtaposition between these two concepts that we're discussing today. I think one of the things that blew my mind as I was crafting the lecture, and I really tried to keep it simple, because I want us to really think on it, and you all need to go back and look at this, because it's going and come in an essay near you somewhere. Why is it that we have not hit upon this in the region? Why is it, how is it that we have not recognized how these two connect and can certainly help us to do a bit of the two? Well, I like to say, as a strategist, have the best of your both worlds, have your cake and eat it. So you're commodifying, but it's true to you. Somebody wanted to say something. Yes, Antonia. Oh, yes, Antonia, I would love to hear what you would have to say, considering your job. Yes, go ahead.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
and
didn't realize how many,
so quiet. I somehow thought I said these lectures are blockbuster today.
nah, miss, my mind going in and out of the thing. But I agree with, I don't know if it was Ava or
It was
wait,
Tonya.
was Tanya? Oh, okay.
Mhm.
I agree with Tanya because it sounds as though the persons would have absorbed whatever it is what in their society, and
Mhm.
also um try to find a way within their given their own experiences to solve an issue within that society, and I guess that would create wherever it is they did. Because I
Mhm.
think we talk about the doctor
Mhm.
who was scarred by what her grandmother experienced and
Mhm.
decided to make sure that she could provide a solution to that problem,
Mhm.
um by becoming the best or by finding a solution to it. In Tobago, we here, um what I
I don't have to say
realized.
too much, because there's a discussion point at the end where I'll need you to say more. But I just wanted to have a sense of, um, is there any example at all in Tobago where we are having our cake and eating it, so to speak, in terms of what we were just discussing?
Dr. Tull, based on the question you asked previously, right? Could it be that it's because of that colonialism have sort of stripped us of the importance of our own cultural identity, and we don't see how rich it is and how valuable it is?
Interesting. And so, being transplanted, we are still lost in a sense. We
In a
still.
sense, yeah, and we still identify with the identity or the our colonizers,
Mhm.
but we're slowly starting to appreciate the richness of our own cultural identity. And like the
Mhm.
examples, I think in Trinidad would be like the Americans and the First Peoples in Arima,
Mhm.
who are slowly, seeing the value and the importance of their own personal cultural identity.
But that.
And
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
no,
Go
that's
ahead.
it. Go ahead.
Okay. I appreciate that. I'm going to play devil's advocate there. So that sounds to me, if I love to theorize, so that sounds to me as if you're suggesting that that's like one layer of this. But then what about, and that is the layer from the supplier. Remember, class, we are building on the theoretical constructs that we've learned so far. So Thorsby has told us about there being an exchange. That's why we could talk about the economics of culture, not so demand and supply. So what Alicia is mentioning there quite correctly sounds though to me that that's operating on the realm of the supplier. What about the demander? Um, what are they doing? Are they ready to accept, to say that we can begin to give? Remember we talk about given and created. So the given would be like what the gentleman was talking about, where we now making, like heritage making. Are we buying our own culture? Have we reached there? Are we comfortable with that? What are we consuming? Or is it a case that it needs to be made funky or like foreign? I don't know. Tell me. Have we reached a place where we are at that level where we can, as suppliers, we can give culture, like create socially constructed context that people would consume? Is everybody understanding what I'm asking?
What,
Yes.
Dr. what I've seen us being able to supply
Mm-hmm.
would, we are not creating audiences who are willing to pay for our culture. So that's
Ah.
what we have been supplying.
So we are not creating audiences, you said, who are
We're not
willing to
creating audiences
pay.
who are willing to pay.
But
See,
I like the fact that
somebody
you
else
said
can
we are
come,
not
okay,
creating
carnival
audiences.
aside.
So hold on, Jamie. So you said we are not creating audiences who are willing to pay. You said that, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You recognize the importance of what you said there. We are not creating audiences. Do we
Mm-hmm.
understand that that is part of it when we talk about social construction? And I was hoping that Kevin would have come back in here since he was the one who had advanced it. Do we recognize that part of the social constructedness is that we have to create the audience? Do you think we realize that as people, as stakeholders in arts and culture, in the arts and cultural ecosystem? Do we?
No,
Certainly not from the top.
no.
Ah.
Seeing as you asked me to jump back in, Dr. Todd.
It was
Yes.
your point. Because we
No,
understand that, I mean,
today my
class,
brain
we
a little far.
understand
Today
it
my brain a
very
little far.
clearly from the side of supplier, not so?
Mm-hmm.
How far can we be sustainable that way? Didn't Crosby says demand and supply?
But to me, from what the gentleman, from what Marcus was saying, I more would lean on the side of saying that he think it was mostly created from how he opened his talk when he introduced himself, and he introduced himself the way he wanted to be identified.
Yes, he
You know,
did.
yeah, you know how he wanted to be identified, and that boils back down to like marketing and branding and stuff.
But that's the
So
give. But that's the
we,
socially constructed
so
part.
part
Yeah,
of it, yeah.
yeah. But he's saying, which is like what we started to talk about before we got to him. That's why he was placed there in the middle of the lecture. Is that you can do something with your natural. You can do something with your identity that is created, that is just part of you.
You could like pull out the parts that
Yes, you
you want to amplify.
yes, something like Parang and House to House. Can you imagine a community somewhere in the country where that may have been born? Where's Roxanne? And people coming into that community just to see that experience. I have never seen that. Maybe if I saw it, maybe I would like Parang more. I've never seen House to House. I have never been House to House. No, but you see, Jamie saying Lopi, no, but that's crowds and crowds of people. We're not talking that. You see, that is a different kind now. That's where it has gone now on a level where it has become now a festival experience. We are talking about like what the Americans are doing. Like if you have to go like what Quasi mentioned about the goat race, like what Barbados Crop Over still has been able to do simply by not changing a route for Kaduma Day. We are not like Trinidad where you all over the place. There's a set route since that would have moved from going at the stadium, which is 30 plus years now. So what that has done is that it has socially constructed traditions that have allowed for commercialization. You must know where your wings lady is. You must know where you buy the rag from so, the drink over so, this thing, because it's one set thing. Something as simple as that, if you see what I'm saying. And somehow we do see people in the developed world do this. I think it's in this class where I gave the example of buying the simple bottle in Dominican Republic from the house where they said Ovano slept. Is it this house? Is it this class? Right. That's an example of what I'm talking about. That's a narrative that has some truth in it, but there's a socially constructed thing inside of there. And of course, there are people who are Dominicano that more than likely buy into that. And when they come back, they purchase these things. Yes, House Parang natural. But there's a way in which one can certainly create, construct experiences and cultural artifacts that may be of value to someone else to the extent that they'd be willing to purchase it. Okay, so Tanya wanted to say something. James has his hand up. Maria. Okay, Maria, you go ahead then, Tanya, then James, and then I think Kevin might come back in. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that they did have I did participate in one of those house-to-house parang sessions in Arima. We actually did go. I was in the parang band, and we actually did go from people's houses. It was a set route, and I think there were like a couple of bands that they had, and they had like certain houses where we had to go on parang, and they had like the traditional foods and stuff there for you to eat afterwards, no, because that's the kind of the cultural thing where when you're parang by somebody else, you have to feed them. So they had that experience. I just wanted to say that they did happen in Arima.
We need more of that. Awesome. Yes, James. Then Tonya, she still wants to say something. Quasi. I see Roxanne has put it in the chat, correct? Paramin Festival, social construct.
You know, I was just thinking about that idea of, you know, the conversation around people not wanting to pay for things. And when you think about the idea that people talking right now about the idea of creating festival system versus a competition system, like what is happening in Carnival, we could package those things in a way where people actually want to pay for it, and people have actually said that. You know, so I think we could get to a point where we find a way to, you know, package, produce, commodify the culture in a way that people actually want to pay for it, not just in Trinidad, but worldwide.
Yes, certainly. Yes. Sonia, you wanted to say something?
Yes. I forget the original point, but I think based on this sort of train we've been going on, and like similar to what James was talking about just now, this idea of you know, carnival. Like if you use carnival as an example, I feel like everybody's been talking about carnival is cancelled. So what we gonna do? How we going to celebrate carnival? And this idea of carnival has become so, it's organized in a sense, right? You know, you go to this, if you're going to play mass, you're playing mass, so you're on the road, you're buying a thing. If you're going to go to a fest, you're buying a ticket, you're going to a fest. Even, you know, the smaller things, you're going to the Kaiso tent, you're going to this place. And in a sense, it's like, that's sort of like an external like product that we are then partaking in rather than something that is intrinsic to us that we are able to interact with. And so I feel like that's like a through line I think about when we keep thinking about, well, how are we going to celebrate carnivals? Then how do we bring carnival back into this intrinsic celebration rather than something that we partaking externally to feel collective bonds in a sense?
Do you think there's a class? Do you think, in light of what Tanya was just saying, building on what James said, do you think it's a sliding scale? Do you think like you can go the realm of socially constructed identity to create a cultural commodity and then like slide back on the other side? I'm not sure. Or do you think it's a case where when it gone one way, that's it and you can't pull it back?
I think it has to have balance with the experience and the dollar value. There were a lot of points that arose yesterday, right? And I had an issue with when I heard, not an issue, but it kind of bothered my soul now. When they said that you have to create the audience now. If the experience is authentic, I think the audience will come. That's what I think. That's me. If you stay true to it now, the audience will find you in a way. If they're interested, they will find you. And sometimes it's not always about trying to create the audience or trying to create the dollar. I think sometimes the dollar and that's the things that get watered down because we're trying to, all right, let me charge them. They will come. Sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes they really have to go through. You will have to buy the bulletin, go through feeders, and you understand? Let's create the experience. That parent we're talking about, that's our experience. That going house to house is our experience. If by chance, when they go from the house to the next house, you buy something here and they buy something there,
that's
like,
the
cool.
idea. That's the
Understand? But
idea. It's like to facilitate. It's kind of like what the guy was saying. I forget. Marcus was saying. It kind of it helps then the realness, or as you're saying, the authenticity is what is the lure, is what is the thing that motivates the consumer to go along the spectrum of what throws, because the cultural value characteristics. Because take for example Kwazi, and I appreciate what you're saying. I do respect that. But I do believe that one has to create audiences. I would say certainly, if I use my own experience of the old yard, I attended the old yard when it was VA Laku once, maybe twice, when it was at Boy Scouts. And at the time, I went with a colleague to capture images because I felt that the Carnival Studies unit did not have enough of its own images of traditional masquerade. I was most surprised by that. And that actually is one of the sub points that I want to make in terms of what we're talking about here. It's a question, and then I will kind of come back on it again. And years later, the project was brought to us because, of course, the committee was getting old and they were tired, and so we had it. And the truth is, we had to create audiences, and the creating of the audiences did come from what you just said there, in trying as much as possible to render something authentic, but in the process of trying to construct authenticity, we engaged in heritage making. And in engaging in heritage making through performance and the story and the aesthetic, we were able to get those new audiences. When I attended that VA Laku, I saw some young children with parents, older folk, yachties. If you've been to the old yard, you know that we have some very specific market segments, and of course, we have bigger crowds than what they would have had down at Boy Scouts. And so the thing about the creating of the audience, it's not a case where every single person in the audience is there for a commercial purpose in terms of just straight up consumption because this is great to be there, but rather that you have them within their interwoven, those who are believers in what is happening. As you're saying, it's an experience and it's authentic, interwoven with those who you know would always see it for one of those other value constructs that Throsby advances. And when you do that, that is what helps with the sustainability of the cultural good and service. That is what helps with the commodification to be sustainable in a developmental way. That, as you are saying, Kwazi, is not a case of money, 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 because we know that's quite short-lived. So I want to pause there and hear James, Antonia, Maria. Go ahead. And of course, anyone is free to comment on what I just said there. James, go ahead. Or is your hand just up?
Oh, it's up. Sorry. Oh.
Antonia, you had something to say?
Based on what Kwasi was saying, in Tobago, we have the harvest experience, which was once something that for churchgoers basically. And what was big, the religious aspect where they would have the cantata and all of that. And people would go to church from early morning till the afternoon, and then they would go around to various houses to eat and to share. But now it's like this big block line where people will just come out and engage in secular behavior, not so overeating and drinking and liming on the roadside and that kind of thing. And even though people don't make money from it, because it's not like people just come out and sell food, because all the food and drinks free. The banks and the credit unions and them making money because they give out loans for these things.
Wow.
People is going to debt to keep harvest because they're
Wow.
cooking like a lot of food and inviting all their friends, and now it's not even by invitation. People could just walk in your yard and eat and drink and lime, and you don't even know who they are. So
Wow.
you see the thing develop from something that was very religious and somewhat intimate into something that is secular and big and I don't know what else.
So
But
that
you see what you were talking about with creating audiences, though I also agree with that, because what not happening with us and the Heritage Festival is we are not creating audiences. So most of these things that we portray on has lost its purpose in the society. So things are no longer relevant, even though we still use the cooking, the methods of cooking. Like people will sell dirt oven bread probably every week, and you will find people using the various methods of cooking in terms of like on a carnival having a speech band play. That has lost its usefulness altogether. People don't do that anymore. So the
Wow.
only time you would see speech band is probably if the government hire a group to, the government put on a competition for it to happen. And what they're not doing is creating new avenues for these things to follow, like tambourine music. Tambourine music outgrow its usefulness like decades ago, and we have not found a new use for it. So it just sitting there on the wayside, and only around heritage time you would hear tambourine.
I think
Yeah. So it's
right.
only now it's starting to make a comeback because people using it for various things. Like you find musicians inserting tambourine samples into their track and whatnot. So you find making a slow comeback, but it's just finding the use for it. Yeah.
So we are hearing that in this sliding scale, when we talked about balance, that to ensure that we don't go too far left or too far right, that there's need for some kind of structure or harnessing. I mean, I can certainly attest to that in my old yard experience, where I rely on my festival management capability to do that. It's like a carefully constructed, woven, but at the same time, on the day of itself, you allow the key players to do as they wish because, of course, that is part of the authentic experience, so to speak. I wanted to raise a question based on my own experience to ask if you think that it's possible where someone may not be of the heritage. And to my mind, Marcus, I think that was his name, he was hinting at that a bit. Someone who is not born of that particular cultural identity, does that make him in a favorable position to contribute to the construction of culture and the commodification of culture? Is there some kind of curiosity that might be at play that helps with that in a positive way? Or is that not necessarily authentic or valid in terms of that person's intervention? Yes, Kwazi?
Well, a while back, we spoke about the carrying soca music to the Japan or something, so right?
Yes.
I believe that was said. Well, from my observation, right, I think it's more so, I don't think those things were carried. I think those things will, they come, they experience, and they go back and they work, and they carry back the experience to where they came from. I think they're more like reggae music and hip hop, and especially with Japan. Like they will come to your country, like it and experience it, like it, enjoy it. I want to carry it back and carry and let the experience blossom there now and create their own sub.
But remember, that is
their own.
not of them. That is not their cultural identity, you see. You have to remember how the two are formed, so to speak, or how they're seen. So one is given. So in that regard, that would have been given because they would have come here and, as you say, take, but it was given to them. Remember how Remember, when the person comes here, they are festival tourists. So that was given to them, right? As opposed to it being naturally of them, you see? When they go back now and they do what they will with it, they are now engaged in heritage making, and in a sense, or in the making of new culture, or in the further commodification of it, if you understand what I'm saying. So they now become the supplier. But in the first instance, they are the one who's consuming, because they would have come here and they see this thing and they take it, but it's not of them then, so to speak. Yes, Alice.
I have no problem with it, but I think there's a fine line. It can cross into cultural appropriation. If now that they are sharing aspects of the culture that is not uniquely theirs, I think there needs to be a balance, and I think they need to give homage to the group that they got, that is linked to.
So when Adele came out with her hairstyle, I think that would have been Notting Hill Carnival Day. That was what? Appropriation or not?
I think it was appropriation.
I don't think it was appropriate.
I don't think it was appropriation.
In light of what Kathy was just saying, what was that? I'm making it hard for you because I want all you to think. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I want you all to think critically as you are. In light of what Kwasi just say about Japan and all that, why is that? And she take it? She can't take it? We're not commodifying? And we say we want people to recognize us and what we do? Yes, Kevin.
I don't think it was appropriation at all. I see it as
appreciation. Jamie says appreciation.
And also a major piece of branding for Jamaica and the Caribbean and stuff, because people who would have probably not known that Notting Hill came from a Caribbean background will now know, because of Adele is like a major star. So I think it's appreciation.
Alicia says appropriation. I have no view on it. I wish I had a view on it. I just know. I just ain't sure about it. Yes, Tanya. A lot of things about that image have disturbed me, though, I must say, because I am somebody who analyzes visuals as well. I'm Notting Hill Carnival. I know it have mixtures of cultures and what have you. But for me, any carnival across the globe come from here. I suppose I might have feel a little better if the flag was the red, white, and black.
Than Jamaican, yeah. Agreed.
That's agreed. Genocide, they are ready. So it's not like you're biting and you don't know that you don't know. So I don't have a problem with that already. So I have some kind of mixed emotion.
But is that Adele's fault or is that our fault? Because Notting Hill, Carnival came from here, but what it has turned into now, a lot of people don't even know it came from here.
Look where
and it has just become, this Caribbean festival.
Yes, Kevin.
Look where Kevin
yes.
Going.
Yeah.
It's somewhere I was listening to some discussion and the people get irate when somebody say, well, it's your fault. Is it in one of my classes? The person says, so wait, I must turn around and make sure that they consume in my culture too. Is it this class or is it another class?
Look at a small example. Look at a couple of weeks ago. So as you all would have known, because I sent you all some stuff in the group. So we are doing some work with the Louisville World Affairs Council, right? Great. So they had me do a talk, and I was speaking about our culture and Trinidad and stuff, and telling them that the steel pan came from here, and they now meet people from across the world every day. They are the Cultural Exchange Board, and the executive director did not know that pan came from Trinidad. And I'm like, so what are we doing? And they have a steel orchestra there in Louisville. They have a children's steel orchestra. And she sent me the video.
Hold on. Go slow with me, please. They have a steel pan orchestra.
Yeah, so there's this school. And this
Oh,
Go
no,
ahead.
that can't come from Trinidad and Tobago.
No.
I am sorry, I cannot take that fault. I don't know how the Trinidadians feel, but that fault does not rest with me. You
I
cannot
don't know
tell
where it
me
rests, but I mean,
you are
yeah.
teaching this thing and you ain't even try to find out where this thing come from. You
No,
just,
no. She was not even teaching it.
or
She
she was
no.
teaching it.
She had exposed me to saying that they have a steel pan orchestra in
Oh,
their city.
I
Yeah, there's
thought,
a steel pan orchestra in her city. But she, as the person in charge of like cultural exchange,
I think that it's
didn't
her
know.
fault though. That fault
Yeah,
resting by,
but also, I mean, there are people from here who are, living there, and I mean, no one has ever raised the point that this is a Trinidadian thing. So I don't know what to say.
maybe they assume that they know because
Probably because I assume that everybody knew.
I anyhow, I take
Um,
the point that you're making, Kevin, but I am worried for her. Before
I
we
worried
go,
for us.
yeah, Amy, then Maria, and here at the bottom, Ava. Yes, Ava. Let me come by Ava first, and then
Go
Jim.
ahead.
Then
Yeah.
go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to say that in Japan, there was a Jamaican festival in one of their cities, and when I went to the festival, well, I was so excited to go to the festival because I was telling myself, oh God, I could finally get some Caribbean things, excited to go to this festival. And when I showed up, the festival, all these stalls, they had tents, vendors selling products and whatnot, right? They were playing Jamaican music. And all these stalls were managed by Japanese people.
By who?
By Japanese people. Not Jamaican people, by Japanese people.
Where
They
this
were
was?
wearing in
Notting
Japan.
Hill. This one Notting Hill?
No, in Japan.
Oh, in Japan.
In Japan itself. They were so think about it. This is the scenario. I, as someone from the Caribbean, was so excited to go to this Jamaican festival to experience authentic Caribbean culture. I go over to the city, walk up into the festival, all the tents. Okay, I'm gonna lie. If it had 20 tents, 17 of the tents was Japanese people. 3 of the tents had black people in it, actually selling produce, and those 3 tents were selling like jerk chicken. The Japanese people were selling all sorts of Rastafarian colored like merchandise. They had their hair wrapped up in headbands. Somebody was even had the audacity to be selling hot pepper. It was just Japanese people. So this idea that we have that is mostly our responsibility to brand our culture and put it out there, I think it's a one-sided view, also given our history of having our culture, not just our culture, but the things that we have commodified taken from us without our permission and being used without our permission. That has less to do with us and more to do with the person that's taken it. Because there are a lot of
That's why I
Jamaicans in
say the
Japan.
taken when they come and they take. I think we lack structures though.
Yeah,
That's
we
my
definitely benefit
view.
from it. We could definitely benefit, but it was so jarring to see a bunch of Japanese people in those tents, and the actual Jamaicans were just in the audience. It had more Jamaicans in the audience than in the tents, actually like benefiting.
This goes on worldwide. In Barbados, we have a scenario now. When you go on the Gap, I don't know, for those of you who go Barbados, you would be aware of this. You can get local food on the Gap. Well, everybody like Bajan macaroni pie. We know this, right? And you could go on. There was a time when you went on the Gap, you could go and purchase Bajan macaroni pie, pork or fish or barbecue chicken. It used to be pork or fish because that is of us, And in the last 6 years or so, it's barbecue chicken and this macaroni pie. But guess who baking the macaroni pie now? Jamaicans. So there are about 3 major stalls on the Gap where people purchase this, and it's Jamaicans, but it's Bajan macaroni pie. And at first, for me, I used to have to wrap my head around that. Well, my friends coming from Trinidad, them just glad to get the macaroni pie, so them ain't fighting up. Me, I wait until I could eat home, or I go in down where I know it's Bajans cooking it, and eventually I kind of seg the way to it. But that continues to beat me. I say, wow, look at this. This is amazing. So this happens all the time. For me, I see it as a matter of structures in a sense. Like certain things I could let slide. We talking in the context of what Ava was saying there. That's on a global scale. And of course, the question is always beckoned as to what really are we gaining from it? Because I mean, we are having this class today, and we're not just talking about this just because we can. This is really about us having an understanding of what difference this can make in the context of sustainability, in the context of understanding in a deeper way what arts culture can mean to our society, and not just accepting that commodification simply means commercial and, as Kwasi was saying, money, money, money. So the question is, what is lacking as well, and to go back on my point that I think Alicia had tried to answer when I talked about the curiosity. My feeling is that sometimes curiosity can help, because as a heritage maker through the old yard, because I'm not from Trinidad and Tobago, there are things that I try to put there based on my own lack of understanding or my curiosity that sometimes I think a Trimbagonian may take for granted, because it's so much a part of you, as we were saying about when it is of you as opposed to social construction, if you see what I'm saying. Jamie, Kevin, Ava, I still want to come to that point you were making about the state fighting. It will come back in. Jamie, go ahead if you were going to say something.
Okay, yeah, it was tied to what Kevon and slightly to Ava. So
go ahead.
Just now, right? Did anybody see the Amazing Race, the episode on the Amazing Race?
Yes, I did. I watched
it. Good, yeah.
You said okay, right, good. So back to the pan issue, but I forgot the actual point, but I'm using an example. I can't remember it. I should have written anything to articulate it for y'all. I've been hearing, so you all know I work in government. So from a different perspective, there are several things several streams of thought we are hearing, that I am hearing, right? One is, and Dr. Phil, you know I'm going to allude to this, one is that made no sense for us to have done it. And that's from more than one point of view, right? Because they're not seeing the benefits that could happen. Because the argument is the immediate, the short. Sorry?
I asked Kwasi if he hear that.
Wow.
After I'm preached that everything about money. Imagine we could hear that some people believe that. Okay, that's one. Go on.
They found we spend too much money and they're not seeing what the returns are going to be.
Merciful
people, they started talking about intellectual property rights.
But they had to sign off. They would have to send something and get people permission.
They had to, right? But here's what they're saying. Here's what the argument is, and I believe it's because the people who are saying this, who are spewing this, don't know what went on behind the scenes, right?
That's right.
Right? It's from a lack of ignorance. But let's just put it out here, because sometimes the people who are the most ignorant, with the least amount of information, are the ones with the loudest voices.
You're telling me.
So the second point is the intellectual property. They say, oh, that is our carnival, that was our pan, that was our this, that was our that. I'm surprised they didn't say that was our song. Because that is a Harry Belafonte. They was from Beetlejuice, which was a remake of Roaring Lions, one of a Roaring Lions song that Harry Belafonte sang, etc., right? But nobody made a point about that. No, they don't know. They don't know. I'm convinced people don't know. And the third thing was, what was the third thing they said? The third thing they said, I didn't write it down. Oh dear.
But already, class, I know all you were sleeping on me at first. You realize the relevance of the lecture.
Sorry?
The reason why these things are being said is there is a lack of understanding as to how cultural identity connects with cultural value. That allows us to sustainably commodify. That is the problem. Right? The problem we have.
And I think it is linked to what the video I shared in the class group, in the WhatsApp chat.
That is from my homeland, my lady.
Yeah, some of the points she made, she's very relevant to our class. That's why I shared it. I didn't say that. I just wanted people, to get, because when I shared it on page, I hashtag values, cultural values, cultural identity, and what was the third thing I said? Oh God, I can't even remember now. Why is my I'm forgetting things.
You didn't know I was going to teach this today?
No, I did not know. That's the whole thing. That's what the universities sometimes do for me. And the other, Dr. Tull, you were mentioning about structures. And it is true. And we lack structure, specifically seen as they want to throw intellectual property into the discussion in these areas. Grenada, St. Lucia, and I believe Guyana. No. Grenada, St. Lucia, and another Caribbean island are all getting funded from the CIFF, from the CDB. Brand and protect to help do several things with their carnival. One is to branding and marketing, and the other one is intellectual property. To protect it, to protect the heritage part of it that they have, which would be the jab from Grenada. One of what we call the Moko Jambi over here for St. Lucia, and I forgot what was the third one because
it's Dominica. Grenada,
Dominica.
But
that's
it. That is Caribbean export. I think that's Caribbean export.
The CIIF fund. They combine together, and they're the one that's where they get any funding from.
It's CDB. It's CDB.
Right?
Yeah. But that's Dominica's, Grenada, and St. Lucia, correct?
Right. Dominica was the third, right? Yeah. So look at that. Look at that. They're looking for the structure in place.
As a further incentive that you all will be happy to be sitting in this program, the person who runs the CIF is an ACAM graduate. Let me just rest that right there for you.
Marielle.
That's right. And as all of her work basically is spawned off of what she learned right here in this program. There you go. She herself would say that.
You see that?
That's true. That is so true. Yeah, but I say all that, I just bring that to our attention because back to what we were talking, our real time examples.
Yeah. But I want to just a moment. Please keep the hands on the thing. Two things that Ava said in here I wanted to pick up on. I'm going to tap back a little bit. She was talking about the stick fighting semis, and this is harping on the point about structure because you see, the thing with structure is that we get nervous about it. Because anytime we talk about structure in the context of the discussion we're having here, we seem to always feel that it's about money. And this is why Kwazi's point, even though he was disagreeing in some respects to what Jimmy was saying, this is why his point is so relevant. It's so important because we have to have a more broad-based understanding of structure in terms of having a balanced result from it, a balanced outcome. So that structure isn't only supposed to engender returns financially, but structure is supposed to also make it easier that we can see clearer the paths to development and sustainability. So the experience that Ava was putting here about the stick fighting, of saying that people were willing to pay the money to go. Do I have that correct, Ava, in terms of what you had here? But the organizers didn't see that as something worthy of pursuing. And, this is where sometimes to me, we don't see where we can step out of ourselves as persons who are natural conduits of the culture or the heritage to recognize that you are heritage makers as well. It's like a simultaneous effort. And for me now, the heritage making inside of there would be transporting those people down. But as someone who is into the contemporary realm of the arts and culture, I ain't just getting a maxi to come down the road. Whatever it is that they're drinking down there in the bar, you go get shots on that in the van and this and next and third. And I think this is where sometimes those who are operating in the popular realm, this is how they advantage or they are able to be ahead of the traditional aspects of the festival experience. And then we vex with them But they look at these things and they see where the opportunities lie then in terms of they're seeing commodification, but they recognize if they continue to build on the experience, continue to build on what already is a tradition, you know, and use that to create new arts and cultural products, they are commodifying and creating what you may call either downstream or upstream, depending on the value it has. That helps them to be more sustainable in whatever they're offering. And when I say this, I think about the greens in the pan, where the Caesar's armies and the Scorches and even Be Mobile took advantage of that. I'm trying to remember some of the other larger groups that used to be in there, using that as a way to solidify their brands. And now where's the greens? All of them have solidified their brands, made themselves stronger, leave that, gone and do something else. And where's the greens now, class? Where's the greens?
Bacchanal Road.
Bacchanal Road, as Jimmy say.
So we've gone from green to black to pitch because we're on the road. And so much so now, look at it. One of your leading soca artists, she didn't say she feeling to touch the Savannah grass. Yes, another artist did sing that. She said she feeling to touch the road and bust a wing. So if you see what I'm saying, class, there is a way in which if we truly understand cultural identity, we will see why is it people have value for the things that they do and why they purchase. But even more importantly, if we understand it, we can manipulate it. And the word manipulation is not being used here in a negative way, but we can, let me change that, we can mold and harness it then. That can allow us to generate greater sustainable returns, that we end up with a wider array of products and services, some of which, borrowing again from Kwasi, are not necessarily for money. And I believe I see Ava was saying something like that in the chat as well. But they're there to help continue to solidify whatever it is you're offering. Comments, please. I see Tonya wants to say something. No, Tonya.
No, this was way back when we were talking about this.
Right. The point that Ava was making here now, the second one, about the commodification of your culture and it being pervasive, but pervasive in the sense of being taken. I mean, this point is valid in the sense that we're coming back to structures again, class. I remind us of the example of Canada's cultural policy. This is why Canada would have created the cultural policy that it has. And that is why it has focused so much on heritage for that reason. And because it emphasizes the protection of its arts and culture, it is out of that that not only the heritage can thrive, but that's why the Drakes and the Celine Dion's too can thrive. And so there is a way in which we have to recognize and create the structures that will help us to get that balance that we were talking about so long ago. I mean, even when you think, you go back to Marcus's presentation, one can certainly see that as he traversed that journey as a photographer and even identifying those stories, he has created his own structures to ensure that he is striking a balance that he feels comfortable with, that resonates with his cultural identity and what he has as his value construct. Do I make sense or no? Tell me. Where everybody gonna know?
Yeah, making sense.
Everybody just go on and leave me there. You know, my point
Well,
is,
yeah, you forget that it's time for break. You always forget me when it comes to break. Anytime. Once we decide to take their own break.
But y'all broke at the beginning. Y'all were there. I don't even know where y'all went and leave me. You will get a break just now, any case, because I want to play the last presentation. It's another TEDx, and this one comes closer to home. I'm going to give you 2 minutes or so. I'm going to have to get somebody to type in the chat when you're ready for your break. And I also have some questions at the end of this slide. I want you, there's 17 of you all. I'll look and see how many questions there are. I want you all to go into groups of 3s to answer those questions. that you would come back next week's class that we will discuss before we go into our lecture next week. I believe we're going into looking at the global cultural economy, and I believe that those questions, whilst they focus squarely on today's class, I think it will be a very good bridge discussion to carry us into looking at the global cultural economy. So I think we can take a quick break here, and that would allow me to set up the last video presentation. I will see if there's a closed caption there that will bring up the text as well, for those who prefer that and would find that more user-friendly.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Okay, so let's take a break and we can come back here at 8:15. And that will be the last thing that we'll do for the day. When we look at that, just have a quick discussion and wrap up.
8:1?
8:12 now, so you take
Yes.
a 3-minute break and come back.
3 minutes?
No, if you take 10 minutes, then we go until 9, take 3 minutes and we'll finish early. Makes sense, doesn't it? I'm serious. Right. Right, class? Are we all here again?
Hi, Dr. Tyler. Checking my mic. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
And I don't know why when I try to talk during class while everybody on, I'm not hearing anything. Oh, nobody's saying.
We hear you well.
We're hearing you well now.
Okay. I wanted to talk about the parang, right, Julia, because I feel as though what we're seeing is the experience is something that comes natural to some people, right? In terms of cultural identity. And the social construct is what is driving how the rest of society accepts it, right? So, for instance, house parang and parang, like when we see the festivals, etc., has two different constructs, right? So the festivals will have the music, they will have the food, you'll see evidence of costuming and all of those things, right? But house parang also has a structure. But I feel as though because in our society, parang is revered as Christmas music. That is why for some people it might resonate more than others.
Right.
Parang is not Christmas music. It is popular at Christmas time because the Annunciations and the Nacimientos talk about the birth of Christ, and in those aspects, it is traditional and it is religious and rituals and those kind of things. But in terms of the festivals, for instance, when the season opens in September. But in past years, most people not interested in hearing parang so early in the season. So when you have all the different areas like Jamie and they were saying, Lopino and Paramin and San Rafael and Beach and all of those places that have like a roving, like you remember B bandwagon, right? So every week, once the season opens, you're going to a different community, traditionally known for parang. And these communities, it is highlighted at Christmas time, but for instance, my family, because I grew up in Parang, right? My family, those are Parang and whole year because there's Easter Parang. For somebody, we have it. There's Parang for everything. Rio Manzanare have nothing to do with Christmas. That is the Aguinaldo where a man is talking about his need to get to his sick mother. He have to cross this river to get to. So it's a sad song, you understand? Not associated with Christmas at all, but most people know Rio Manzanare, right? So I think that the point about creating markets as well is important because now that 100 does this Christmas in July, that is a new market for Christmas music, for parang music that people see as traditional. So that's why you have, while a lot of people will go to the Parliament Festival because that is what is popular and you'll get a lot of the different elements associated with Parang and Christmas. In a lot of these smaller villages, people don't go and they don't want to pay to go, but they will pay to go Parliament. So you find that within the last few years, the last 5 years in particular, from the time I was a student to now, the turnout is poor and it's only $20. It's only $20 to go to one of those shows. But it's more than it's almost $200 to go to Parliament.
I find that very interesting because I am hearing all of what Roxanne is saying there. I've been to Parliament once and I don't like it. But I think I would more be excited by going into a community and seeing what she's talking about because I think I'm always intrigued by how
Yes, yes. I'm
It
thinking
is
about
a
the
comment.
drive-by.
I am intrigued by how communities engage with themselves and for themselves and how they welcome others. And I always think of greater value is what is derived from that. So, for example, everybody now who never used to go before, they go Mearo because of Duckies and Curvon. But along the way, you ain't telling me you driving straight from down this side to go Mearo. You're gonna stop. If you don't buy gas, you're buying something. When you're buying something, you might buy a snack, you're certainly going to buy drinks. You're certainly going to stop somewhere to take pictures. You're going to get into the geospace, the geoculture of where you are headed to. And when you go there, it's not to say you're gonna just, it's like a KFC run, you're gonna pick it up curbside and you go. You're gonna stay. Even in this context, people stay by their cars, and one of the bars, of course, play music, and they sampling fish going from one to the next, and so they go. As a matter of fact, in a sense, COVID kind of seemed to have helped it, because if more, the last time I went, there were at least 5, 6 cars lined, and of course everybody spaced out because they buy their vehicle. And so just like that, that in a sense is the makings of an organic street festival. They didn't see it, but I see it already. And if you want to get a particular something to drink, that bar may not have, you have to go down to the other bar. Or if you want high ice, you have to go up to the other bar. So you're talking about walking a few steps from one pole to the next in a concentrated area. And so I think to myself that it comes right back to, I'm not sure if it was Jim who made the comment, but certainly my PM said it. I trying to remember she take that from me or nurse, no, but I had to laugh when I heard her say it. Lack of cultural confidence. We really do lack it, you know. We really, really do lack it, because we don't recognize that what we have is really something that is not just for sale per se, but it really does create the platforms and the avenues for sustainability. And I mean, even listening to Roxanne's submission about the parang, you know, that is within there, because it's pretty clear and it links back again to the idea of structures that, you know, this is where Jamie, you know, you know, come in handy, because in a case like that, those are where you would need those kinds of structures, not policing policy, but policy that encourages, like, you know, what the Canadian cultural policy has done for its own arts and culture. Okay, so let's go now to this last TEDx. This is actually one of my favorites, and she is going to talk about how the arts links up there with my ideas of cultural value and identity.
The brilliant playwright Adrienne Kennedy wrote a volume called People Who Have Led My Plays. And if I were to write a volume, it would be called Artists Who Have Led My Exhibitions.
Joanne, I am not seeing anything unless you want me to watch you watching it.
Sorry?
I'm not seeing the screen unless I'm supposed to be watching you watching it.
You are not seeing the screen. That is true.
I'm seeing you.
Just a minute. I was actually trying to move me. Are you seeing the screen now?
As of yes.
All right, let's go again. Is it big on your end because I've blown it up?
That's big.
Great, awesome.
The brilliant playwright Adrian Kennedy wrote a volume called People Who Have Led My Plays. And if I were to write a volume, it would be called Artists Who Have Led My Exhibitions. Because my work in understanding art and in understanding culture has come by following artists, by looking at what artists mean and what they do and who they are. JJ from Good Times. Significant to many people, of course, because of Dynamite, but perhaps more significant as the first really Black artist on primetime TV. Jean-Michel Basquiat, important to me, because the first Black artist in real time that showed me the possibility of who and what I was about to enter into. My overall project is about art, specifically about Black artists, very generally about the way in which art can change the way we think about culture and ourselves. My interest is in artists who understand and rewrite history, who think about themselves within the narrative of the larger world of art, but who have created new places for us to see and understand. I'm showing two artists here, Glenn Ligon and Kara Walker, two of many who really form for me the essential questions that I wanted to bring as a curator to the world. I was interested in the idea of why and how I could create a new story, a new narrative in art history, and a new narrative in the world. And to do this, I knew that I had to see the way in which artists work, understand the artist studio as a laboratory, imagine then reinventing the museum as a think tank, and looking at the exhibition as the ultimate white paper, asking questions, providing the space to look and to think about answers. In 1994, when I was a curator at the Whitney Museum, I made an exhibition called Blackmail. It looked at the intersection of race and gender in contemporary American art. It sought to express the ways in which art could provide a space for a dialogue, complicated dialogue with many, many points of entry, and how the museum could be the space for this contest of ideas. This exhibition included over 20 artists of various ages and races, but all looking at Black masculinity from a very particular point of view. What was significant about this exhibition is the way in which it engaged me in my role as a curator, as a catalyst for this dialogue. One of the things that happened very distinctly in the course of this exhibition is I was confronted with the idea of how powerful images can be in people's understanding of themselves and each other. I'm showing you two works, one on the right by Leon Golub, one on the left by Robert Colescott. And in the course of the exhibition, which was contentious, controversial, and ultimately for me, life-changing in my sense of what art could be, a woman came up to me on the gallery floor to express her concern about the nature of how powerful images could be and how we understood each other. And she pointed to the work on the left to tell me how problematic this image was as it related for her to the idea of how Black people had been represented. And she pointed to the image on the right as an example to me of the kind of dignity that needed to be portrayed to work against those images in the media. She then assigned these works racial identities, basically saying to me that the work on the right clearly was made by a Black artist, the work on the left clearly by artists, when in effect that was the opposite case. Both Colescott, African-American artist, Leon Golub, a white artist. The point of that for me was to say in that space, in that moment, that I really, more than anything, wanted to understand how images could work, how images did work, and how artists provided a space bigger than one that we could imagine in our day-to-day lives to work through these images. Fast forward, and I end up in Harlem, home for many of Black America, very much the psychic heart of the Black experience, really the place where the Harlem Renaissance existed. Harlem now sort of explaining and thinking of itself in this part of the century, looking both backwards and forwards. I always say Harlem is an interesting community because unlike many other places, it thinks of itself in the past, present, and the future simultaneously. No one speaks of it just in the now. It's always what it was and what it can be. And in thinking about that, then my second project, the second question I ask is, can a museum be a catalyst in a community? Can a museum house artists and allow them to be change agents as communities rethink themselves? This is Harlem actually on January 20th, thinking about itself in a very wonderful way. So I work now at the Studio Museum in Harlem, thinking about exhibitions there, thinking about what it means to discover art's possibility. Now, what does this mean to some of you? In some cases, I know that many of you are involved in cross-cultural dialogues. You're involved in ideas of creativity and innovation. Think about the place that artists can play in that. That is the kind of incubation and advocacy that I work towards in working with young Black artists. Think about artists not as content providers, though they can be brilliant at that, but again, as real catalysts. The Studio Museum was founded in the late 60s, and I bring this up because it's important to locate this practice in history, to look at 1968 in the incredible historic moment that is, and think of the arc that has happened since then, to think of the possibilities that we are all privileged to stand in today, and imagine that this museum that came out of a moment of great protest, and one that was so much about examining the history and the legacy of important African American artists to the history of art in this country, like Jacob Lawrence, Norman Lewis, Ramir Bearden, and then, of course, to bring us to today. In 1975, Muhammad Ali gave a lecture at Harvard University. After his lecture, a student got up and said to him, "Give us a poem." And Muhammad Ali said, "Me, we." A profound statement about the individual and the community. The space in which now, in my project of discovery, of thinking about artists, of trying to define what might be Black art cultural movement of the 21st century, what that might mean for cultural movements all over this moment, the me, we seems incredibly prescient, totally important. To this end, the specific project that has made this possible for me is a series of exhibitions, all titled with an F, Freestyle, Frequency, and Flow, which have set out to discover and define the young Black artists working in this moment, who I feel strongly will continue to work over the next many years. This series of exhibitions was made specifically to try and question the idea of what it would mean now, at this point in history, to see art as a catalyst. What it means now, at this point in history, as we define and redefine culture, Black culture specifically in my case, but culture generally. I named this group of artists around an idea which I put out there called post-Black, really meant to define them as artists who came and start their work now, looking back at history, but start in this moment historically. It is really in this sense of discovery that I have a new set of questions that I'm asking. This new set of questions is, what does it mean right now to be African American in America? What can artwork say about this? Where can a museum exist as the place for us all to have this conversation? Really, most exciting about this is thinking about the energy and the excitement that young artists can bring. Their works for me are about not always just simply about the aesthetic innovation that their minds imagine, that their visions create and put out there in the world, but more perhaps importantly through the excitement of the community that they create as important voices that would allow us right now to understand our situation as well as in the future. I am continually amazed by the way in which the subject of race can take itself in many places that we don't imagine it should be. I am always amazed by the way in which artists are willing to do that in their work. It is why I look to art. It's why I ask questions of art. It is why I make exhibitions. Now, this exhibition, as I said, 40 young artists done over a course of 8 years, and for me, it's about considering the implications. It's considering the implications of this generation has to say to the rest of us. It's considering what it means for these artists to be both out in the world as their work travels, but in their communities as people who are seeing and thinking about the issues that face us. It's also about thinking about the creative spirit and nurturing it, and imagining, particularly in urban America, about the nurturing of this spirit. Now, where perhaps does this end up right now? For me, it is about reimagining this cultural discourse in an international context. The iteration of this project has been called Flow, with the idea now of creating a real network of artists around the world, really looking not so much from Harlem and out, but looking across. And Flow looked at artists all born on the continent of Africa. And as many of us think about that continent, think about what it means to us all in the 21st century, I have begun that looking through artists, through artworks, and imagining what they can tell us about the future, what they tell us about our future, and what they create in their sense of offering us this great possibility of watching that continent emerge as part of our bigger dialogue. So, what do I discover when I look at artworks? What do I think about when I think about art? I feel like the privilege I've had as a curator is not just the discovery of new works, the discovery of exciting works, but really it has been what I've discovered about myself and what I can offer in the space of an exhibition, to talk about beauty, to talk about power, to talk about ourselves, and to talk and speak to each other. That's what makes me get up every day and want to think about this generation of Black artists and artists around the world. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, class.
I was clapping with the audience, yes?
She was great, wasn't she?
Fantastic.
Yes.
Oh Lord, that's one of my favorites. I downloaded it and put it inside of the points. I think it's so instructive, really. And for me, it bridges what we've been discussing and what we will be discussing next week. But please let me hear your perspective on it. Who wants to go first? Yes, Kevin.
Me? I didn't. Okay.
Yes, I
I'll
saw
go.
blinking, so I thought you.
Hey.
I'll go. I think what I'm getting from this entire session today, and I hope that I'm on the right track, is just how I feel about it. I think that well, it's a question really. Can it be that we in the Caribbean context have socially constructed attitudes that don't place enough value on our own cultural identity?
That's one.
Okay, that is what I'm getting from this entire thing today. So I think for us to go anywhere, we need to change these social constructs, and through that create the audiences and create that value, and get them actually seeing the value in our own thing.
Yes, I wanted you all to deconstruct the notions of cultural identity, particularly as it pertains to cultural value, because we are traditionally schooled to think when we give consideration to cultural identity, it's always down a particular road or through a particular lens of things to do with cultural preservation and retention and so on, without seeing the possibilities, as she said, beyond that. You realize that she's into social constructedness?
Yeah, through art. So it's really using the arts for social change.
That's right.
That's what
And
she's doing.
still,
Yeah.
she finds ways to link it back to self identity, Black.
Mhm.
I like her idea of post Black. I wonder what would be post Caribbean. Am I scaring anybody?
No.
What
I feel like post Caribbean is where your prime minister living.
you feel post Caribbean is where what?
That's where your prime minister living. That's how we ain't reached there yet.
I know that for sure. She tell all you come and live there for a whole That's for sure. But you see, it is important to understand, and it's interesting that you should say that of her, that even in the idea of post, which is what Thelma mentions, it's hinged on something still from the past, but it allows us to contemplate the now. So that in listening to Prime Minister Motley, underlying that sentiment there is the idea of small is beautiful. And small is beautiful is an economic adage, it's an economic perspective that was advanced by an economist called Schumacher. But more importantly to our discussion and in relation to Prime Minister Motley is one that the late Honorable Owen Arthur believed in. And she would have been mentored by him. She would have come up in the party under him. When she spoke about being Minister of Culture and all these things, it would have been under him in his government, you see. And so when one thinks about identity, I, as a strategist, someone who's come out of international relations coming into this field, I like to tell people is also to think about what that means for you as an advantage. When you think about cultural identity, socio-cultural identity and cultural value, what are the advantages there existing inherent in those constructs that you can capitalize on? And I feel as if those are some of the active ways in which we can pursue sustainability. And I feel as if when one looks at Thelma's presentation there, she speaks to that. You know, she batting in her crease. She ain't trying to solve the whole planet, but she's right there in Harlem. And through that, as she says, she's trying to see how that can make a difference in the first instance there. And she does mention across the world. She does mention that. Any other comments or thoughts? No? All right.
I wanted to say something.
Yes, go ahead, Eva.
I really like the idea of the way how she presented the linkage between art and your cultural identity, because it's something that I've been trying to articulate for a really long time. Like when I rant about like the Black Lives Matter movement, and I always try to explain that, you know, I see it is that there's a capital B for Black people and then there's a common B, and one might be our heritage and the other one might be like our cultural identity, which is why you can say you could be pro-Black even if you're not actually Black, you know? And I think that we have a responsibility, like especially in the Caribbean, where a lot of our culture has molded and shaped like Black American culture, but we don't take any sort of credit for it whatsoever. I think in the Caribbean, we're in danger of running, of going down a path where our culture is handed to us and we have no choice but to take it and just accept that this is what it is, you know? And I look at it when it comes to our tourism, that the rest of the world has branded us as like this tourist destination, and we haven't really bothered to go past these sandy beaches and coconut trees, you know, motif that they have for us. And we're so much more than that. And the very fact that Caribbean people can't even travel around the Caribbean easily because it's marketed to outsiders and therefore the prices are for outsiders. That's such a stark reality for us. Like we can't even network well, you know, in order to bolster our own self. And I think
well, you know, it's quite ironic that it was through one of our own cultural, natural experiences that we started to see the rise in regional tourists, which is out of the carnival. I remember when Nurse and I started measuring the carnivals. Up until that point in time, governments and cultural aficionados were saying that, you know, the carnival is not Trinidad, not coming Barbados for crop over and these kinds of things. And there was this idea that people in the region only came to Trinidad for carnival. But our work, when we measured, showed that there was a growing regional carnival market. There was a growing regional tourist, as a matter of fact. Because what started happening is that, yes, they come for the carnival, but they would always come back because they make friends. So then they'll come back for Easter.
And it's so easy for us to make friends.
exactly. And exactly. And so, it's very interesting when you see, so we come back by structures again. There's structures in place that make it difficult for these kinds of nuances to become pervasive. One of the things that also intrigued me about her discussion was that juxtaposition between the two pieces of art. And we kind of talked about it a little bit because we talked about appropriation. But it would seem to me that there's also room within this landscape of someone owning it and carrying it forward. And I would dare say that those new waves of carnival that we were talking about, and the way in which Caribbean-ness, quote unquote, is being commodified, in a sense, that is in part happening because people are owning it. I did see the video, for example, of Cardi B singing on her birthday, Lucy. For somehow Lucy resonates with her. And that's really interesting because there are a lot of people her age group don't know Lucy. They don't know that song. They have a clue. And that is in part like what you were saying there about how foreign culture has increasingly replaced what is our own. And of course we find it difficult to come back to source or come back to self, unless of course it's within the school system. So these are the things that I want you all to contemplate. I turn you to this last slide where I want you, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions there. I want you all to assemble yourselves in groups of, there's 17 of y'all. So I should have 3 groups of, oh Lord, that's real big. I shall have 4 groups. I'll have 1 group of 5, I ain't like that. I never do like that, but okay, no problem. That's big. That's a huge group. So I would want you all to assemble yourself in 3s and 2s. Let me make it simpler, right? And I want you to tackle those questions for me based on today's lecture. Kindly note that part of the lecture was recorded, but the slides will be there. I will post them later tonight or tomorrow, more than likely tomorrow, that you would be able to access. And next week when we come for class, we will begin with the discussion there and move naturally into looking at the global cultural and creative economy. Any questions or comments before we close?
You said this was the last presentation for Module 1?
This is the last lecture for Module 1, yes.
Okay.
Yes, of course,
And
by tomorrow as well.
And the course outline is up, right?
No, that now has to go because we had to wait for the
approval
coursework to be approved and all of that.
Right. Okay, good.
It's a good thing I didn't post it because up to today I had to make a change. That's what the dean was talking to me about. Yes. Any other questions or comments? Let me just take off the recording.